Zaitis and Ms. Perry. We as a whole, not just the four of us, but as a collective group, we have a combined total of 165 years of experience working with school-age children at various levels. So there's a lot of wealth of knowledge in this webinar, and if you have a question, we'll be happy to answer that. Now, as we talk, if you think of a question, please go ahead and type in the Q&A. Do not type it in the chat because you won't be able to get access to that. So keep in the Q&A. And if it's something that we can answer immediately, it'll get answered. If not, we'll have a Q&A portion, a section at the end of the webinar. Next. Okay, we're going to take a poll. We want to know how you feel about the topic. We picked the topic because, with the fact that our schools were closed due to the pandemic, we know that there are going to be students who are going to be anxious about coming back to campus. So we want to equip you as parents with some strategies on how you can best support them. So go ahead and put the poll up now, and please answer the poll. We've got about a minute to respond to that. Just want to check and see how prepared you are about providing strategies to help your child manage school anxiety and refusal. About 30 seconds left on the poll. Okay, I hope you were able to, you got a chance to fill out the poll. It was just one question, so your minute is up. We're going to continue with the rest of the webinar. There we go. Okay, so this is the response. So we got 46% feel that they need help. 40% have some strategies to help them manage, and then 13% already know what strategies they can use to help manage school anxiety and refusal. Excellent. We love hearing about so many of you not knowing what to do, because that means that we can give you information. Counselors love being supportive and helping and giving you great strategies. Next. So today we have 4 objectives. The first objective is we want you to understand school avoidance and why it happens. And then we're going to talk about, the second objective is identifying what school avoidance looks like. So first we understand it, and then we're able to identify it in our friends and family. A third objective is we're going to develop knowledge and strategies to help. So first understand, then identify, and then you develop knowledge and strategies to be able to support and help. And then finally, the fourth objective is we're going to understand the importance of school attendance and review, just a quick review of the school attendance review board process, also called SARB. Next slide, please. Okay, we're gonna watch a video that will help us understand school refusal.
School refusal is a behaviour that can be associated with a range of family and school factors. It is often accompanied by anxiety and distress in a child and can lead to extended school absence. Supporting children to feel good about attending school and valued as part of the school community helps to promote their mental health and well-being.
School refusal is when a child experiences significant difficulty attending school and they can result in prolonged absence from school. When faced with the prospect of having to attend school, they can become quite distressed about going to school. They may cry, scream, or display tantrum-like behaviour. School refusal is more than occasional reluctance to attend school. In fact, it's quite normal for a child to miss some school during the year or have some anxiety around attending on occasion.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, I would like to take the time to go over some things again. If you have a question, any question arises, you can go ahead and tap that in the Q&A portion instead of the chat, and we'll either answer that live or respond to that during the Q&A portion of this presentation. So what is school refusal? It happens when a student's behavior or anxiety prevents them from attending school. So students who avoid school, they're doing that because they're gaining something positive by missing school, or there's something negative going on in school that's causing them to avoid that. Usually school avoidance or refusal can manifest itself in a physical way. So one thing we always tell parents to check out is make sure that you take your child to a pediatrician first to ensure that it's not actually something physical. So for example, I had a student where it manifested as a headache, and part of what we did to rule out whether it was physical was to have them go see a doctor to make sure there's nothing actually wrong physically. And it wasn't just a headache. The headache wasn't because of physical reasons, but actually because of mental reasons. School avoidance affects between 2 to 5% of all school-age children, K through 12. And transit school avoidance is common among all school-age children, which is sometimes there'll be school avoidance, but then they get over it, and sometimes it'll pop up again. It usually happens around transition times. Next. So, like we mentioned before, school avoidance has a lot to do with it. It's closely linked to anxiety. And so there are 3 types of anxiety that you usually see in relation to school avoidance. So social and performance anxiety are very similar. We decided to put them in 2 boxes today because we wanted to make it even clearer to you what it looks like on the school campus. So being new to a school, not having friends at school, being around a lot of people, feeling pressure to act a certain way, especially in high school and middle school. Conflict with peers and friends, so people they've known all along. I joke around that in middle school, like friends are, they're friends like this week and they're enemies the next week. And so these kind of conflicts end up making students not want to come to school. And then, the fear of being judged. And then there's performance anxiety. So whenever there's presentations, they have to perform in a play, any kind of test, those kind of things bring pressure, and that could lead to school anxiety as well. And then separation anxiety. Just anxiety is some form of anxiety, and a little bit of anxiety is normal, to be expected. And so we see separation anxiety in children who go from, they're transitioning from being at home to go on after preschool or kindergarten. We also see that come up again when they go from middle to high school, and also elementary to middle school. So whenever there's a big transition, you will typically see separation anxiety with students. But in this kind of situations, it continues to manifest beyond just the normal separation anxiety. So they may start to worry about your health and safety. They might worry that they coming to school means that they could get sick and then they'll make you sick, or that something would happen to you when they're gone. You also see that when there's a new baby or a new pet at home, and just they have a difficult time going away from parents or family members. And you will see that when in the morning before school, there's a prolonged goodbyes and they refuse to just kind of let you go. They want to keep coming back to you as opposed to going back to the classroom. Next. So we believe that behavior usually has a function. What that means is there is a reason why that child or the student is acting that way. And one example of this is attention from significant others. So if your child gets attention when they don't go to school, so if they stay at home and they get attention from you because you're staying at home, then they're going to be more likely to want to stay at home. If there's something going on at school, so problem with a friend or maybe even dealing with bullying or anything like that, and they need to escape that situation, then they won't want to come to school. If there are any kind of reinforcers outside of school, so for example, if they're home, they get to play video games, or they get to go on the computer, whatever it is that they have at home, or even play with your dog, or whatever it is that they have at home that they don't have at school, then they're not going to want to come to school. And then you also have like sort of sensory overloads. I've had students who can find the school environment to be a little harsh. So maybe the lighting is harsh, it's too loud, any of those things. So these are stimuli that can make it difficult for a student to want to come to school. Next slide, please. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Georgina Flores, to talk about what school avoidance looks like across grade levels from K through 12.
Hi everyone, my name is Georgina Flores. I'm an elementary school counselor, and we're going to dive right into what you can look for in your child that shows school avoidance. Next, please. So part of our second objective today is to learn about the signs that you can identify in your children. Some of the signs are dependent on age. I'm in an elementary school, so I see much different signs than some parents may see in middle school, high school, but most of these will apply to all children in grades K through 12. Starting with crying. I'm sure as parents, you've seen crying across the board from kinder all the way to 12th grade. Maybe sometimes that looks like whining. Sometimes it can be a full-on tantrum or meltdown. Sometimes it's arguing or refusing to leave the house and putting up a fight. I know that happens a lot in elementary school and probably in middle school and high school as well as refusing to get out of the car once they already are at school, if you manage to get them into the car to school. It can also look like clinging behavior. So maybe your child is hanging around you a bit more, clinging on to you, not wanting to leave your side. This is very typical in elementary school especially, but it can also happen in other grade levels. Physical complaints is a big one. That one happens across the board, and that is related to somatic symptoms typically. So somatic symptoms occur when you feel anxiety and you basically make yourself feel a physical symptom. And that can be a headache, stomach ache, muscle pain. And so you may hear your children complain of these things, thinking that they're sick, but really just feeling nervous or anxious. And so if they do get to school, it can cause them to go to the nurse's office frequently. And you may get a call from the nurse every now and then, saying they have a stomach ache or a headache, and really it could be nerves. And that happens usually before a test. We see it often, but especially right now with things that are, uncertain, kids may be feeling it more. And so you may notice it more in your children. As well as texts and phone calls from middle schoolers and high schools. This isn't too common in elementary school because they don't really have phones typically, but in middle school, high school, I hear a lot of those students that are, texting their parents, calling them to pick them up early, saying they feel sick, and then also testing boundaries with their parents. So this, again, across the board, you may see that your child is asking, for certain things that they don't typically ask for you to let them, stay home, or just trying to push boundaries with you. And then that, when they don't get their way, that may result in moodiness, irritability. They may be talking back some more, putting up a fight about things. And in another aspect, trouble sleeping is another sign that you can look out for. Maybe your child is having trouble staying asleep through the night. Maybe they're unable to fall asleep. In elementary school, this typically looks like them, having nightmares, or, not wanting you to leave their side before bed, or wanting to stay up and coming into your room often. In middle school and high school, they're probably staying up on their devices or just tossing and turning. And so this could be, again, due to the avoidance and anxiety that they may be feeling. Some other pointers that you can look for are sometimes, they avoid their schoolwork or household chores. So they're just avoiding things altogether, maybe even making threats of self-harm. This can occur in all grades, but typically it's seen in middle school and high school. And then regularly missing classes. So for distance learning, maybe they were not wanting to log into their classes. Now that they're going to go back to school, they may be, trying to leave middle school, high school, possibly ditching, and then refusing to participate in social events or school events, family events. That little piece of, them isolating themselves sometimes is because of anxiety. And lastly, worrying about disappointing others. So they may be expressing that they're worried about disappointing their teachers, their parents, their friends, family, and that's just, negative self-talk, which we'll get into in the next few slides. Next, please. So some of the signs of refusal that we discussed could also be directly linked to their anxiety about COVID-19 specifically. And it's important to consider that kids might be excited to return to school, and that's what we're seeing, is that they're very excited to get back into their routine, but it is going to be an adjustment, and that's important to remember. Your child might also be worried about what school is going to look like. There's going to be, new procedures and protocols, and wearing masks all day and social distancing, and so some kids are nervous about that. Some aren't thinking about that, but it's important as parents to know that that's something that may come up as they start school, and they start to notice these things, and that school isn't going to look the same as it did before. And so the unknown can create some more anxiety. So it's important, we're going to talk about strategies, but it's important to keep your child in the loop and aware, and we're going to talk again about some strategies you can use. But just know that the anxiety is normal and expected. Just like with adults, when we don't know what's going to happen, when we have something that's coming up and we don't know the outcome of it, it creates anxiety naturally. So for your child, it's going to create anxiety. And as adults, we recognize that typically it's anxiety. We know when we're anxious, but kids sometimes don't know what it means. And so that's when they get those physical symptoms. That's when they, get crazy inside. They just get crazy feelings. And so as counselors, starting in elementary school, we're teaching them how to identify those feelings. And as well as throughout middle school and high school, they're still learning, what it means when they feel their heart racing, what it means when they're getting sweaty, what it means when they're crying for no reason. And those are all typically, in this situation, I'm talking about anxiety specifically, because there is anxiety right now, not only in your children, but I'm sure as parents, you're feeling some anxiety about this situation too. So adjusting to the new normal is going to take some time, just like time, went by and kids had to adjust to being at home and learning from home. It's going to be another adjustment for them to return to school and to find their routine again. And so that leads us to our next point. Next, please. Which is strategies you can use to support your child. So this is the good stuff that I know you're all here for. Next. Okay, so what can you do to prepare? We're going to have some different sections to strategies. This is in preparation for what's to come. Those of you who have children in the lower grades, kindergarten, you already experienced school starting. The rest of you, starting tomorrow, some more grades are going back and so forth. So these are things you can prepare to do in the meantime, starting with creating a routine. So a routine is key for children to feel secure, and it creates consistency for them, which is important for kids in all ages, K through 12. It's going to look different across the board because it's different, for kindergartners than it is for a 12th grader, but it's possible for all kids. So helping your child get their things ready the day before, making sure that they have their backpack, their lunch, their supplies, anything you can do to make their morning and your morning easier is going to create less stress in the morning, right? They're already going to be feeling anxious possibly. So it's important to help them have a consistent routine and plan. This could be, putting up their schedule somewhere they can see it every day, having, a nighttime or bedtime routine, a morning routine. And that way they have that consistency and feel like, okay, I know what the next day is going to look like. And whatever comes after that, whatever worries they have, you can address separately rather than having a bunch of different, things going on in the morning, creating a more difficult morning for you both. Secondly, a goodbye ritual. So this is important, especially for elementary level kids, because if you don't have a consistent ritual every morning, kids are going to feel, insecure. And so it's important to talk to your child about what your goodbye ritual is going to look like every morning. Maybe that's walking them up to a certain point, giving them a hug or two, and then sending them on their way. Those extra 5 minutes or that extra hug or that extra kiss creates more and more anxiety, and the kids, feel like, okay, yesterday mom did this or dad did this. Now today they're telling me that, no, that's not going to happen. So again, similar to the routine, create that goodbye ritual that's the same and stick to it every day. Third, stay positive. This is easier said than done, but really your child is looking to you to model to them, what you're feeling. And so if they see that you're anxious, nervous, then they're going to feel more anxious and nervous. So sometimes, you fake it till you make it. And of course, it's okay to show natural emotions and you don't want to hide every emotion, that's negative. But for the most part, if you try to be positive about things, then your child is going to feel more secure in themselves and they're going to feel better. Which leads me into sunny thoughts. So positive affirmations are things that we really encourage for anyone, even for ourselves as adults. We can have a negative thought that's going to come naturally. And I can tell you, don't think of a pink elephant with the blue hat. And you're going to think of a pink elephant with a blue hat because that's what our brains do. So it's not going to be helpful for me to tell you, don't think that, if your child is crying and nervous, don't be nervous. And that's typically what our response is because, we don't want children to feel that way, but try to flip it for them. So if you say, I know you're nervous, but I also know that you're very brave and you're going to have a good day. Or, I know that you're having a hard time today, but I know that you're going to be able to get back on track and have a better day. So when you put it in that perspective, it recognizes and, confirms, validates their feelings, but it also lets them know, okay, I'm feeling this way, but, there can be a plus to this. It doesn't have to be bad. And then you're also recognizing what they're feeling rather than saying, don't feel that way. Lastly, give your child insight. And this is important because, again, it goes back to that uncertainty is going to create more anxiety. So the more you can let your child in on, kind of what's to expect, the better it is, obviously with limits too, because you don't want to just, answer every single question. And this depends on developmental level too. Elementary kids, it's going to be different than high school. But just for the most part, with this situation specifically, letting them know what school is going to look like, letting them know that it's not going to be exactly the same as it was, can help them have some insight. That way it's not a shock to them when they do start. And so with that being said, many of you may have already seen this video, but many of you may have not. And this is something we felt was important to share with you to ease some of your anxiety, but also so that you could show it to your children. And each school site may have their own version of this, but the district put out this great video that is all about the safety plan. And so next, please. I'm going to go ahead and play it. It is 5 minutes, so this is a good time to stretch if you need to, but we're going to play it for you, and then we'll get back to strategies.
Schools will be reopening soon. Everyone is working hard to bring students back safely.
A lot has changed, but a lot is going to be the same.
Let's talk about what's going to be different when we go back to school.
So some of the things that we've been doing here at Viejo, which applies to all schools in our district, is just getting ready for our students to come back physically to school. And we take safety precautions very seriously. We want every student, every staff member, and every person on our campus to be safe at all times. And that means that we are disinfecting, we are marking the floors so that students are aware of how far they need to be, so that students and families feel comfortable coming to school.
Some things that will be different here on campus will be when you get to school, there will be one-way pathways. So you're going to look for arrows on the campus. Waiting for class, you're going to be waiting in physical guides. So look for circles, look for arrows, look for tape. Those are the things that you want to stand on until the teacher opens up the door to greet you into the classroom.
Obviously, you're going to see less students at the same time, so everyone's being broken up into groups or cohorts so that we can keep safe physical distancing from each other on campus and in classrooms. You're going to see a little more monitoring of students outside of the classroom and just reminders about wearing masks and things like that.
Our preparation for safety on campus really starts before students get here. We're asking parents to please take your students' temperature before students come on campus and ask if your students are feeling well. And if they have a temperature above 100.4 degrees or have symptoms, please keep them home.
We can protect everyone.
So before we go back to school,
here's what you need to do.
Social distancing and masks will be key.
We also are requiring masks of everybody that enters campus.
Students are going to have to be wearing a mask at all times.
Mask up.
Mask up. Mask up.
Cloth mask. Disposable mask. Gaiter. Bandana.
Putting on a mask is easy.
Depending on the type of mask,
You may need to make adjustments for comfort and effectiveness.
Another thing that that's different is that teachers are going to be checking temperature at the door.
The goal is to be able to greet students at the door, make sure that they are welcoming them, and then give them a quick temperature check to make sure that we're following the guidelines and that everything is good with the students upon entry.
Everyone should know by now that washing your hands is one of the easiest and most important things you can do to protect everyone.
Hand sanitizer is readily available at various locations on campus.
What if you start to feel sick?
Self-screening is so important, so that's the first thing you should do. If you feel sick, stay at home. But if you're on campus and you feel sick, you're going to do the same thing that you would always do, and you're going to go see our nurse. Our nurse is always available for any student that is sick or doesn't feel well on campus.
Be ready to answer questions about how you're feeling.
So some of the things that remain the same, the staff is still here.
The level of education, service, rigor, support that we provide for students is not going to change. Our goals for students aren't going to change.
So I know, many people might feel a little nervous coming back to school, and that's okay. I absolutely was as well. And one of the things I want people to know is it's okay to be scared. It might take a few days just to get used to the new protocols and things we have in place. Our students are the heart and soul of every campus, and that's why we're so excited to have students back. So you're going to see the same enthusiasm, you're going to see the same love, you're going to see the same dedication. What we want to do is walk in love and not fear. So even though we might be behind masks or social distance, that doesn't mean that compassion and that connection is not there. It's just going to look a little different. So take a deep breath. It's going to be okay.
Thank you all for listening and watching. If you haven't seen that, we hope it was helpful. And if you have, thank you for watching again. But again, this is just to help you understand what is going to happen when kids return to school. And so letting your child know can ease some of their anxiety about what they're going to expect. They ended the video with taking a deep breath, and that's what we're going to jump right into in these in-the-moment strategies for parents. So we talked a little bit about what to prepare for, and now these are things you can practice with your children in those situations when your children are crying, throwing a tantrum, refusing to go to school. These are strategies that you can practice with them. Starting with taking deep breaths. So I put 10 deep breaths on there, or we did, and it could be 5, it could be 20, but the point is, we forget sometimes how much breathing really does help our bodies regulate themselves. And so kids hear from the counselors all the time, take a deep breath, belly breathing, put your hands on your belly, take a deep breath through your nose, out through your mouth. And there's a bunch of apps online you can find for this that do guided breathing with kids. You can practice it at home with them and modeling it for them when you're feeling frustrated so that they can, pick up on those strategies too. Secondly, using a grounding activity. This is related to mindfulness, and there has been lots of research on mindfulness and how it can help with, coping with big feelings. And so using your senses in this activity, it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And how you do this activity is basically you look for 5 things you can see around you. So any 5 things you can see, 4 things that you can touch or feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell or taste, and then 1 mindful breath to end it. And basically what this does is, when you're having a big feeling and you're nervous, you're focused all on that feeling and you're amplifying it sometimes. And so distracting your brain with another activity is going to help get yourself in control. And kids, it's like helping them take their mind off of that feeling and calm themselves down so that they can think clearly. Because when they're not thinking clearly, their feelings aren't going to get into control, basically. Thirdly, modeling positive self-talk to reframe your child's thoughts. So this is kind of like the strategy where we talked about sunny thoughts, but basically reframing a negative statement into a positive one. So this is hard, but I can do this. I will try my best. I miss my mom and dad, but I know I'll see them after school. And so as parents, if you hear your child say a negative thought, negative expression, you can change it into a positive one and recognize and validate what they're feeling, but try to give them, that sunny side of things versus just letting them go into that tunnel of negativity. And then lastly, giving your child something comforting to help them stay calm. This one is more typical for elementary level kids, but it can work for middle school, high school. A picture, a note from you. Sometimes we've had younger kids use like the parent's hair tie or something they can keep on them that isn't too distracting, and that will give them a sense of security and comfort to feel better while they are away from you, because they spent so much time with you these last few months that they may be the hardest, that might be the hardest thing for them is being away from you at this time. And with that being said, I'm going to pass this along to another counselor who's presenting today, Michelle Zides, and she'll take over. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Flores. I'm Mrs. Ides, as she mentioned. I'm a counselor at the high school level here in Capistrano Unified. So continuing, when a child won't go to school, it is tempting to treat it as a behavioral problem or to simply ignore it and hope that it goes away. But in looking ahead, we want to be sure that the core issues are being addressed. And a huge part of that is the communication between you and your child. We want to encourage that you are talking with your child about the reasons why he or she does not want to go to school, asking them how they feel and listen to their responses without judgment. Now, we mentioned earlier in our presentation to recognize and understand the different types of why your student might be anxious, and we come back to that now because understanding what is causing them to be anxious is going to help you understand what strategy you're going to be utilizing in helping them. And you want to acknowledge that you understand your child's concerns. As a part of that, we want to emphasize the importance of rising to that challenge. As we just mentioned with the in the moment strategies, encouraging your child to take some deep breaths. Taking those breaths into the belly helps calm both the mind and the body. Helping them understand that challenges actually can be good for the brain and body. Our bodies are actually designed to deal and cope with stress quite frequently. It actually helps us grow and become stronger. So we want to coach our kids to tell themselves that they can do it and they've got this, and their bodies can respond to that. We also want to be sure that we're being compassionate, though. When we see the world through our children's eyes, we can appreciate how they perceive what is going on around them. We want to ask yourself, what is my child saying? What are they hearing? What are they seeing? What are they doing? This will help them to manage those strong emotions. Coaching your child to notice how their body feels when those emotions begin to bubble up, being able to name those emotions, as we mentioned earlier, and then navigating that situation by choosing how to respond. Another strategy that you can use is practicing that ahead of time, talking in advance to your students about what challenges there could be with school and helping your child practice responding well in those scenarios, kind of like a trial run. When a real life stressor happens, they will feel confident that they know how to respond. Next. So some additional tips that we wanted to provide is to help them create that sense of connectedness. As much as we would hope that our students want to go to school because they love math or they love English, we realize that's not always the case. But reasons that they might want to come to school is because they do feel connected, whether that's with a close friend or a buddy, or that they're involved in activities or clubs on campus. So our different schools have a variety of activities or clubs that the kids can be involved in, and that gives them another reason that they will attend school because they're connected to something and they're engaged and they have a reason that they would like to come. We want to help those children develop independence by encouraging those activities with other children outside the home. In some cases, it might be necessary to actually speak with your pediatrician, though. If your child seems to be having a lot of physical symptoms, that is something that we want to check and make sure that there isn't anything else going on. And so seeking support from your pediatrician may be necessary. But we want to make sure that we're making a commitment to be firm on school mornings. The expectation is that they are going to go to school, even if maybe they're feeling, or coming up with some symptoms. Now, a caveat to this, of course, in our current day and time with the COVID, and as we just saw with the safety video, we do need to be aware of certain symptoms and your child might need to stay home. That's a special case, of course, if they're having a temperature above 100.4 or having some of those main COVID symptoms, then of course they do need to stay home, but that's not what we're specifically talking about here with school refusal, but I wanted to, of course, mention that. And then we also, if necessary, you want to be able to include your school with possible interventions. And we're going to actually come back to that tip in a couple of slides later. I'll go over some further interventions that your school may be able to help with. Next. Thank you. So, of course, not going to school is not an option, so parents must find ways to support their children while still helping them get the education they need, but without making your child possibly feel more anxious. The way that you respond to your child's school refusal can impact their ability to cope with their feelings. Creating a positive and trusting relationship would be key. So things obviously like shaming or punishing your child, we would want to avoid that. Telling or letting anybody else in on what is going on. This is a family matter. We wouldn't want to share what your child's going with their friends or peers. Certainly, we don't want to make fun of the child. All of those kind of things could lead to further anxiety, and that would, be against what we're trying to accomplish. As we mentioned earlier, we don't want to assume that the issue is going to work itself out on its own. We want to take steps, but we're also not asking the student. Remember, this is not a discussion, right? The expectation is your student is going to go to school. That's not a discussion item. So those are just kind of some things we want to make sure we're avoiding. Next. But of course, we do need to realize that not everything's going to be perfect. It's not a one and done and everything's probably solved in one situation. So we need to allow for this transition, and keeping in mind communication is the key. That there are going to be good days and there's going to be bad days, some fluctuations. Praise, of course, is important on those good days, and then understanding and compassion, but firmness on those bad days. Understanding the why will help with the plan. As again, we mentioned earlier, understanding the type of anxiety is important so that we are utilizing the proper strategies to help return them to school. For example, if they're more being social anxiety, we're going to encourage that connectedness and joining a club or meeting up with a close friend that they have. Whereas at performance anxiety, staying 6 feet apart though, of course. Whereas if it's performance anxiety, utilizing those in the moment strategies to help them overcome. As mentioned earlier, though, students sometimes are gaining something positive by staying home. So we need to keep in mind that staying home does need to be worse than going to school. So taking away things like their phone if they're home, unless they need it to get in contact with you, but taking away those game controllers so they're not at home just playing games. Those kind of things need to be instituted as part of the intervention so that going to school actually is something they would rather do than just being at home. Next. But at some point we might need to realize that it's become severe, and if nothing is working, you're kind of at the end of your rope. Some last things that we wanted to mention here is, as we already kind of talked about, in case it's a physical symptoms or physical illness, we want to make sure we've ruled out any medical concerns by speaking with your pediatrician. If necessary, if it is severe anxiety or a mental health situation, again, consulting a mental health professional might be a useful intervention. And then again, yes, we want to keep the school involved. Discussing with the school further interventions can be helpful as well. We know especially the middle school and high school level, sometimes the students don't always communicate with their parents, but there might be a trusted adult on campus that they can communicate with, so keeping that communication open. Also then is necessary communication with teachers, and if maybe a meeting with all staff involved with your kid's teacher, the counselor, and so forth, that could be setting up for some further brainstorming and interventions as well. I also wanted to mention a further intervention is continuing with online learning. If physically coming to school is tending to continue to be an issue, we still don't want them to miss their education. And now that online learning is something that we have utilized, that is something that Capistrano Unified does have as an option, is online learning. So even when we go back to full-time, online learning is still an option as well that you can discuss with your school site. It is important that we do keep the school involved because, of course, attendance is a school matter. And to discuss that and further information, I pass things on to our next speaker, Ms. Perry. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sides, very much. My name is Jenna Perry, and I'm going to talk a little bit about attendance, overview of attendance, as well as the difference between school avoidance and truancy, and a little bit about the school attendance review board process. First of all, why is school attendance important? It's important that parents keep in your mind what the goal is here and why it's so important that your students are at school. School attendance is important for multiple reasons. First, attendance is one of the most important indicators of student academic success. It is crucial that students are in school learning the foundational concepts that their education is built upon. For example, only 17% of students who were chronically absent in both kindergarten and first grade were reading proficiently by the third grade. Second, students are more likely to succeed academically when they attend school consistently. By 6th grade, chronic absence, which is defined as missing more than 10% of the days in a school year, becomes a leading indicator that a student will drop out of high school. When a student miss out on key academic concepts due to absences, they fall behind. And when students fall behind, they start to feel like they can't catch up. And this can really affect their motivation for returning to school. Third, consistent school attendance is directly linked to graduation rates and access to college. A student who misses 10 days or more during the school year are 20% less likely to graduate from high school and 25% less likely to enroll in college. And finally, school attendance can be linked to success in the work setting. Those with a high school diploma are better off financially over their lifetime than those without. Also, consistent school attendance is a life skill that can be put to use also once they enter the working world. Next. So what is the difference between school refusal, school avoidance, and truancy? There are differences here. Children who are avoiding school or having school refusal issues often do so to escape a difficult situation, such as bullying, challenging classwork, social immaturity, or fears about school performance. School for them causes severe emotional stress, which may include symptoms of anxiety, tantrums, depression, or even somatic complaints. These students are often willing to do homework. They want to progress in school, but they want to avoid being physically at school because they seek the comfort and security of being at home with their parents. Sometimes these students concoct complex schemes to get out of going to school. They may over-exaggerate physical illness. They may hide behind furniture in the morning or run off and refuse to get into the cars, things like that. School avoidance can be found in students of any age. And then there's truancies, children who are truant from school when they don't want to go because they'd rather be doing something else. Most of the time, these are older students in middle and high school who experience truancy. These students try to conceal their absences from their parents, and they often are not wanting to engage in school nor do schoolwork. I had a situation with my son when he was in high school. He didn't want to take a math test, so he left school early in the middle of the day. He got home and found his sister, who was home sick from school unexpectedly for him. And so he tried to convince me when his sister called to say he left school early that the school was on fire, which wasn't a good idea when your mom works for the school district. Anyway, those kinds of things, those kinds of creative stories can happen when students are truant from school. Sometimes they often have conflicts with peers or other authority figures while they're at school. Another route to truancy, another thing that can get your student heading down the path of truancy, is when your student is marked unexcused on their attendance record because their absence has not been cleared by a parent. Another reason also is when students are absent for reasons other than those considered as excused absences in Board Policy 5112. Next. So our school district has an attendance policy, and we urge parents to make sure that their students attend school on a regular basis, and also to schedule medical and other appointments outside of school hours, so that those kind of appointments are not causing your student to miss school or at least miss very little of school. The district also asks parents and families that they do traveling during school vacation time. The better a student's attendance rate, the more the student will learn and the greater amount of funding that the district will receive from the state for classroom instruction and academic programs. For more information about our school district's attendance policies, we have attached a link to the website here in this presentation. In addition, the district provides a school calendar, also linked on this slide, well in advance of the school year. One purpose for this is to minimize problems for families planning vacations. Knowing the calendar well in advance can aid in planning time away during traditional holiday periods, thereby minimizing your students missing school. Also, following an absence from school, a student is required to bring a written excuse from home, or the school must receive a phone call from parent or guardian to clear that absence within 72 hours. Illnesses, as well as doctor and dental appointments, are excused absences from school. But it's important that the parents communicate with the school when that is the case so that it's marked properly in attendance. Children should not be sent to school when they're not feeling well. However, if illnesses are keeping students away from school, quite often it becomes a concern. For example, if students have more than 14 days throughout a school year absent because of illness, they will need to provide a doctor's note starting at the 15th absence. And also, that's a good idea to meet with the school about what's going on with your student. Next. The School Attendance Review Board, or SARB process, is a process that is implemented when more support is needed beyond school interventions for truant students. This is a combined effort with parents, students, school administrators, community agencies, and law enforcement to help meet the needs of and support parents of students with truancy issues. In a small number of cases that need broader scope of intervention, a SARB hearing can be scheduled. This is a meeting between students, parents, and agency representatives to offer alternative solutions and community resources to help remediate the students' attendance problems. Next. We have provided resources here regarding understanding and managing school anxiety and refusal. We will put the URL code in the chat for you. This is a touch resource screen so that you can touch any of these squares and see the resources regarding that topic that's listed. It's right here now in the chat. Next. I want to thank all of the team members that helped in putting together and presenting this presentation. As you can see, there are many of us that put this together. All of the names and schools that they are counselors at are here. I want to remind parents that there is a counselors at every school in our district, and please feel free to reach out to them for support and help. They also all have a counselor's corner on the school website where you can reach them and be able to see lots of resources that they've posted there online as well. Next. Thank you so much for attending this webinar. We hope that you have learned a little bit more about school refusal and attendance and have gained some more tools for your tool belt when you're dealing with your students that might encounter some of these issues. We'd like to invite you right now to take our exit survey. You can either scan the QR code that's here on this page, or you can use the URL code that right now has just been placed in the chat. Please take the time to just answer a few brief questions that would help us wrap up our presentation here and kind of help us to know what you learned from it. Next. We are now going to move on with a question and answer period regarding questions that are typed in the question and answer screen. So please go ahead and do that if you would have any questions. And thank you again for joining us tonight.
Hi, this is Jessica Bovey. I've been monitoring the Q&A box. We had a few good questions for our panelists. The first one is, a parent said that they're having a hard time getting students to do schoolwork on non-Zoom days. Both parents work full-time. Any suggestions?
So Georgina, I think you kind of responded. Did you want to go over that again, what you wrote in the chat?
Yes, I will respond to it. I'm not sure that everyone can see the chat, but basically I think a good place to start is to begin with incentives, because that is something children are willing to work for, and it doesn't have to be something, you know, materialistic or very expensive. Sometimes parents think it requires buying something, but you know, you can use day-to-day activities as incentives, and that could be time on a device or watching TV or maybe their favorite dinner. Sit down and find out what your child is willing to work for. It's going to be different for every child, and then, create something around that. And like, you can say, for 30 minutes, if you can sit and do your work, then, depending on the age too, for lower grades, sometimes it's a point system or, those charts that you can get for doing chores. You can customize that for behavior. And so that can be, setting expectations, what you want for your child to be able to do, and reasonable expectations. You don't want to put, 20 or 30 things on there. But it can be, maybe 5 things related to school. And that can be, if it's not doing their work during, it was not whenever there was no Zoom, right? No class meetings. So you can say the time that you expect them to sit and do their work, and then what they can earn that's, reasonable for you as a parent too, because it has to be reasonable. But I would say just incentives and working with your child to create those incentives, because then it gets their buy-in. And so if you sit and make a list of, 5 things they'd be willing to work for, use that to your advantage.
The other thing I would just add is from what I was speaking about earlier as well, maybe for the older kids, is to go ahead and make sure there aren't things in the home that they want to stay there for. For example, their video controllers, or, I know the phone can be a challenge because maybe they need to get a hold of you, but I don't know, buying a phone that's just for calls and the internet, or having the internet turned off during the day. I know there's parental controls and those kind of things, so that being at home does not allow them that free time, so to speak. Without doing their work. So the parental controls on the phone as well, where they don't have internet or they can't play games and those kind of things on their phones during the school hours, would be another suggestion.
Yeah, and looking at the function of the behavior like we talked about earlier. So what are they trying to avoid? Or what are they trying to, is there something that, like, some kind of advantage to get it from home? So there's always an underlying reason. There's always something they're trying to get. There's also a function of that behavior. So what does that do to you? Do you respond a certain way when they don't go to school? Whatever that might be, I would say look into that first, because that will help you decide what to do about it. So what is it that they receive, or what did they avoid if they are not going to school? I would, or doing their work, I would start there.
All right, we have about 2 more minutes. We had one other really good question. How do we address older children, like 10 plus, who are concerned about contracting COVID with a recent COVID death in the family? Older children provide statistics and valid arguments.
For speaking, I guess for me, is watching that safety video and a couple of giving statistics and information and data back to those older kids. So we are following the CDC guidelines as a school district. We are following the health protocols that they've put in place. So we are using data to make sure that our schools are safe. That is something that we have worked very hard on, as that video kind of showed. So I don't know if your child or your student has seen that video, but I would definitely have them watch that and know that we have proper protocols in place to ensure safety for our students, for our staff, and for their families back at home. With the wearing masks, with the social distancing, with one-way walking, those are all things we put into place. And so I would say use data and statistics right back at them, that is what our school district has used, and every school site is managing those protocols to ensure safety for our families.
And even after watching the video, they probably need reminders, like Mrs. Zaitis was saying, they probably need reminders every now and then. So remind them that, everyone's getting, checked, the temperature's being checked before they get into a classroom. Remind them that, the seats social distance, everyone's wearing a mask. I think just by showing them all the steps that I've been taking, like Mrs. Zaitis said in the video, it'll sort of help to calm them down.
Okay, we have one more really good question. So a parent asked, what if the reward and consequences no longer work, even when they agree to them? And the parent said they have talked to the school counselor about the situation.
So there are some very more difficult cases like this scenario, but I do think, just again going back to the function, right? There is something that motivates them. We just don't know what it is yet. We're willing to do the work and sort of problem solve and sort of, try different things. So I think, again, going back, what is the function of that behavior? What do they get to do when they don't go to school? And that will then help kind of direct you in what works. I don't know if you've had that conversation yet. I don't want to make any assumptions at all, but that would be kind of where I would start with, okay, what do you get, or what is it that's happening when you get to not go to school or get to do your work?
And just to add on to that as well, and I don't know, again, without knowing the actual case, but next steps might be to go, I don't know if they're having physical symptoms or any mental health concerns, but the next step might also be to involve a medical professional as well, if those things have not been addressed and we're not getting any better, especially if they are saying that they'll do it and they're agreeing with you, you're not having a confrontation, but there's the work still not being done. I would suggest that maybe a mental health or a medical professional might be the next step.
All right, that was all of the questions that were in the Q&A. Just remember, if you'd like to view this, that link is in the chat. And if you have any additional questions or need any additional support, feel free to reach out to the counselor at your school site. I think that's it.
Thank you all for being a part of our webinar tonight. We appreciate you and have a good evening.